Hi, friends. Okay, gonna finish up the chapter that's called The Plan. When we left off, they were saying how the place that they were flying over wasn't even in the atlas. I expect that old giant knows where he's going, the young pilot said. He's leading us to disaster, cried the head of the Air Force. He was shaking with fear. In the seat behind him sat the head of the Army, who was even more terrified. You don't mean to tell me we've gone right out of the atlas, he cried, leaning forward to look. That's exactly what I am telling you, cried the Air Force man. Look for yourself. Here's the very last map in the whole flaming atlas. We went off that over an hour ago. He turned the page. As in all atlases, there were two completely blank pages at the very end. So now we must be somewhere here, he said, putting a finger on one of the blank pages. Where's here? Cried the head of the Army. The young pilot was still grinning broadly. He said to them, That's why they always put two blank pages at the back of the atlas. They're for new countries. You're meant to fill them in yourself. The head of the Air Force glanced down at the ground below. Just look at this godforsaken desert, he cried. All the trees are dead and all the rocks are blue. The giant has stopped, the young pilot said. He's waving us down. The pilots throttled back the engines and all 9 helicopters landed safely on the great yellow wasteland. Then each of them lowered a ramp from its belly. 9 jeeps, one from each helicopter, were driven down the ramps. Each jeep contained 6 soldiers and a vast quantity of thick rope and heavy chains. I don't see any giants, the head of the Army said. The giants is all just out of sight over there, the BFG told them. But if you was taking these swashbuckling, noisy belly poppers any closer, all the giants is waking up at once, and then pop goes the weasel. So you want us to proceed by jeep? The head of the Army said. Yes, the BFG said. But you must all be very, very hushy about it. No roaring of motors, no shouting, no mucking about, no piggery-jokery. The BFG, with Sophie still in his ear, trotted forward, and the jeeps followed close behind. Suddenly, the most dreadful rumbling noise was heard by everyone. The head of the Army went pea-green in the face. Those are guns, he cried. There is a battle raging somewhere up ahead of us. Turn back, the lot of you. Let's get out of here. Pig spiffle, the BFG said. Those noises is not guns. Of course they're guns, shouted the head of the Army. I am a military man, and I know a gun when I hear one. Turn back. Those is just the giants snortling in their sleep, the BFG says. I is a giant myself, and I know a giant snortle when I is hearing one. Are you quite sure? The Army man said anxiously. Anxiously. Are you quite sure? The Army man said anxiously. Positive, the BFG said. Proceed cautiously, the Army man ordered. They all moved on. Then they saw them. Even at a distance, they were enough to scare the daylights out of the soldiers. But when they got close to and saw what the giants really looked like, they began to sweat with fear. 9 fearsome, ugly, half-naked, 50-feet-long brutes lay sprawled over the ground in various grotesque attitudes of sleep, and the sound of their snoring was indeed like gunfire in a battle. The BFG raised a hand. The jeeps all stopped. The soldiers got out. Here's the BFG raising his hands to tell them to stop. The jeep stopping. The giants in different attitudes of sleep, as it says. What happens if one of them wakes up? Whispered the head of the Army, his knees knocking together from fear. If any of them is waking up, he will gobble you down before you can say neck jife. It's Jack. Yeah, he answered, grinning hugely. Me is the only one what won't be gobbled up because giants is never eating giants. Me and Sophie is the only safe ones because I is hiding her if that happens. Oh, he's going to protect Sophie. The head of the Army took several paces to the rear. So did the head of the Air Force. They climbed rather quickly back into their jeep, ready to make a fast getaway if necessary. Go forward, men, the head of the Army said. Go forward and do your duty bravely. The soldiers crept forward with their ropes and chains. All of them were trembling mightily. None dared speak a word. The BFG, with Sophie now sitting on the palm of his hand, stood nearby watching the operation. To give the soldiers their due, they were extremely courageous. There were 6 well-trained, efficient men working on each giant, and within 10 minutes, 8 out of the 9 giants had been trussed up like chickens and were still snoring contentedly. Wow. The 9th, who happened to be the flesh lump eater was causing trouble for the soldiers because he was lying with his right arm tucked underneath his enormous body. You guys ever do that? You ever have your arm underneath you when you're sleeping? It was impossible to tie his wrists and arms together without first getting that arm out from underneath him. Very, very cautiously, the 6 soldiers who were working on the fresh lump eater. Sorry, guys, I have such a hard time with that name. The 6 soldiers who were working on the flesh lump eater began to pull at the huge arm, trying to release it. The flesh lump eater opened his tiny piggy black eyes. "Which of you foul pesters is wiggling my arm?" he bellowed. "Is that you, you rotsome man-hugger?" Suddenly, he saw the soldiers. In a flash, he was sitting up. He looked around him. He saw more soldiers. With a roar, he leapt to his feet. The soldiers, petrified with fear, froze where they were. They had no weapons with them. The head of the army put his jeep into reverse. "Human beings!" the flesh lump eater yelled. "What is all you flesh-bunking, rotsome, half-baked beans doing in our country?" He made a grab at a soldier, and he swept him up in his hand. "I is having early suppers today," he shouted, holding the poor squirming soldier at arm's length and roaring with laughter. Sophie, standing on the palm of the BFG's hand, was watching horror-struck. "Do something," she cried. "Quick, before he eats him! Put that human being down," the BFG shouted. The flesh lump eater turned and stared at the BFG. "What is you doing here with all these grotty twiglets?" he bellowed. You is making me very suspicious." Like suspicious? The BFG made a rush at the flesh lump eater, but the colossal 54-foot giant simply knocked him over with a flick of his free arm. At the same time, Sophie fell off the BFG's palm to the ground. Her mind was racing. She must do something. She must. She must. She remembered the sapphire brooch the queen had pinned to her chest. Quickly, she undid it. "I is guzzling you nice and slow," the flesh lump eater was saying to the soldier in his hand. "Then I is guzzling 10 or 20 more of you midgy little maggots down there. You is not getting away from me because I is galloping 50 times faster than you." Sophie ran up behind the flesh lump eater. She was holding the brooch between her fingers. Friends, a brooch is like a pin, like a decorative pin, a piece of jewelry that someone might wear. When she ran up close to the great naked hairy legs, she rammed the 3-inch long pin of the brooch as hard as she could into the flesh lump eater's right ankle. It went deep into the flesh and stayed there. See the pin from the brooch? The giant gave a roar of pain and jumped high in the air. He dropped the soldier and made a grab for his ankle. BFG, knowing what a coward the flesh lump eater was, saw his chance. "You was bitten by a snake," he shouted. "I seed it biting you. It was a frightsome poisonous viper. It was a dreadly, dangerous, windscreen viper." "Save our souls!" bellowed the flesh lump eater. "Sound the crumpets! I is bitten by a septicus venomous windscreen viper." He flopped to the ground, and he sat there howling his head off and clutching his ankle with both hands. Sounds a little dramatic. His fingers felt the brooch. "The teeth of the deadly viper is still sticking into me," he yelled. "I is feeling the teeth sticking into my anklet." The BFG saw his second chance. "We must be getting those viper's teeth out at once," he cried. "Otherwise, you is deader than duck soup. I is helping you." The BFG knelt down beside the flesh lump eater. You must grab," no, the BFG is talking. "You must grab your anklet very tight with both hands," he ordered. "That will stop the poisonous juices from the venomous viper going up your leg and into your heart." The flesh lump eater grabbed his ankle with both hands. "Now close your eyes and grittle your teeth and look up to heaven and say your prayers while I is taking out the teeth of the venomous viper," the BFG said. The terrified flesh lump eater did exactly as he was told. The BFG signaled for some rope. A soldier rushed it over to him. With both the flesh lump eater's hands gripping his ankle, it was a simple matter for the BFG to tie the ankles and hands together with a tight knot. Aha, sneaky BFG. "I is pulling out the frightsome viper's teeth," the BFG said as he pulled the knot tight. "Do it quickly," shouted the flesh lump eater, "before I is pizened to death." "There he is," said the BFG, standing up. "You can look now." When the flesh lump Eater saw that he was trussed up like a turkey, he gave a yell so loud that the heavens trembled. He rolled and he wriggled. He fought and he figgled, he squirmed and he squiggled, but there was not a thing he could do. Well done, you, cried Sophie. Well done, you, said the BFG, smiling down at the little girl. You is saving all of our lives. Will you please get that brooch back for me, Sophie said. It belongs to the queen. The BFG pulled the beautiful brooch out of the flesh lump eater's ankle. The flesh lump eater howled. The BFG wiped the pin and handed it back to Sophie, howling like, oh, how. Curiously, not one of the other 8 snoring giants had even woken up during this schmozzle. When you was only sleeping 1 or 2 hours a day, you was sleeping extra doubly deep, the BFG explained. The heads of the Army and the Air Force drove forward once again in their jeep. Her Majesty will be very pleased with me, the head of the Army said. I shall probably get a medal. What's the next move? Shall probably get a medal. What's the next move? Now you was driving all over to my cave to load up my bottles of dreams, the BFG said. We can't waste time with that rubbish, the Army General said. It is the Queen's order, Sophie said. She was now back on the BFG's hand. So the 9 jeeps drove across the BFG's cave, and the great dream loading operation began. There were 50,000 jars in all to be loaded up, more than 5,000 to each jeep, and it took over an hour to finish the job. While the soldiers were loading the dreams, the BFG and Sophie disappeared over the mountains on a mysterious errand. Friends, there is a little more left of the chapter, but if I make this video too long, I can't get it onto YouTube. So unfortunately, I have to stop right there. There's a little more left, and then the next chapter is called Feeding Time. See you next time. Next time, we'll finish this chapter and hopefully get the whole next chapter done. Oh yeah, Feeding Time's a short chapter. Bye, friends.